The comma is the most commonly used punctuation mark in English, and is probably the most poorly and inconsistently applied. Some say commas tell you when to pause and breathe when reading a sentence, and that's quite a good way to think about them, but we also need to learn some of the rules for their usage. Some writers pepper their prose with a liberal dusting of commas, apparently leaving them where they fall with no regard for the rules of punctuation. Clearly, this isn't the right way to go about it. Almost as bad is the approach of using no commas at all. This strategy is adopted by those writers who lack confidence in punctuation, who feel that the best thing to do in the circumstances is not to use them at all, in case they use them incorrectly. Again, that doesn't work. There are rules for using commas, and many of them are simple, although some are far from hard and fast. So let's look at 3 important uses of a comma. First, to separate items on a list. Second, with conjunctions. And lastly, with introductory words and phrases. Commas are used to separate items in a list. If you are listing more than 2 items, you should use a comma to separate them. Here are some examples. The journal article was written by Evans, Jones and Smith. The ingredients were flour, yeast, water, salt and egg. The options for breakfast were cereal, rolls or toast. Note that between the last 2 items in the list, where we have put an and or an or, we don't use a comma. At least that's the rule in British English. If you are writing American English, you will also insert a comma between the second last item and the and or the or. Here's an example. We were given access to papers, books, abstracts and reports. This is known as the Oxford, Harvard or serial comma. Just like that. Commas in lists are not optional. You must use them for the sentence to make sense. But serial commas are a matter of choice and house style. Whomever you're writing for, make sure you know what their preferred style is. If there is no stated style, pick your own, but be consistent. Now, let's look at the second use of commas, when we use them with conjunctions. There are 7 so-called coordinating conjunctions in English. These are and, but, so, for, nor, yet, and or. We use these joining words to link together 2 or more independent clauses. An independent clause is one that could stand alone as a sentence in its own right, because it contains a subject and a verb. When we use a coordinating conjunction, we precede it with a comma. Let's look at some examples. She argued the case well, and she managed to convince the jury. He took charge of the situation, but he did not enjoy the task. They presented us with an ultimatum, so we had no choice. A common mistake is to place the required comma after rather than before the conjunction. Here's an example. We purified the protein and, our colleagues analysed it. Which of course is incorrect, so don't do that. But of course it wouldn't be English if there weren't some exceptions to the rule, would it? If the clauses are both short, then it's considered acceptable to omit the comma completely. As in these examples. We tried and we succeeded. I laughed and I cried. They competed and they won. In each case, the overall sentence is short, and we don't really need the small pause that a comma often signifies. Now, before we leave this discussion of commas and conjunctions, it's important to highlight a common mistake writers make, and that's with the word because. Because is a conjunction, but it isn't a coordinating one. And this means that the comma rule that we've highlighted doesn't apply. However, many writers incorrectly insert a comma before any phrase beginning with the word because. Take a look at this example. The teacher was irate, comma, because this was the third time it had happened. We don't need a comma here. And of course, this sentence is incorrect. Here's another example. The student achieved a distinction because she had worked hard. This time we've correctly omitted the comma. And this brings us to our third common use of a comma, when we use it with an introductory word or phrase. We often construct sentences with a short introductory or preliminary word or phrase before going on to the main part of the sentence. When we do this, we should insert a comma to separate off that introduction. This allows the briefest of pauses, maybe even to take a breath before going on to read the rest of the sentence. This is perhaps easier to show than to explain, so have a look at these examples and listen to how they sound. Now, let us examine the evidence. When difficulties arise, speak to your line manager. Given the circumstances, his actions were appropriate. Clearly, these were not the most important problems. In each case, we're not simply running the introduction and the rest of the sentence together, but we are pausing just momentarily to help add clarity to the meaning of the sentence. It's almost as if the punctuation is like musical notation, helping the reader know how to say the sentence out loud. Again, of course, there is an exception to this rule. If the phrase is very short, or if there's little danger of confusing your reader, you may leave out the comma. Take a look at these examples. After the ceremony, we celebrated. Soon we will be leaving. In each case, because the overall sentence is short, we don't need a comma. In this lesson, we've looked at 3 common uses of a comma, and in our next lesson, we'll be looking at 3 more. Already in this lesson, we've started to notice that while some rules of grammar and punctuation are hard and fast, others are more flexible, more subjective. In case I haven't got that across, let's give the last word to that great playwright Oscar Wilde, who once, when describing his hard day's work, said, "I was working on the proof of one of my poems all the morning and took out a comma, and in the afternoon, well, I put it back again." If you would like to find out more about writing, why not subscribe to this channel, or take a look at 2 of my books which were written specially for those who find it difficult. Also, you can keep in touch on Twitter and follow my blog, The Business of Discovery. I look forward to seeing you next time.